Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Hoskins. I'm the founder. I am the user interface director, user experience director for pureCHIROnotes. And there's been a lot of questions about macros. So I'm going to use this time to go over how we create macros, what they look like, and so forth, and how they can be used, how easy they are to create. There is a do this in 30-second challenge video. I know that's really, really fast. The whole purpose of that was not to teach, but to just show how quickly the um, the macros can be created. So what I want to do now is switch over to the screen where it has this. I'm going to turning towards the screen, so it's not that I'm trying to ignore you. I'm just focusing on the screen. Here we have the dashboard. Um, this is a dummy account, so you're not going to see any real client information. And what I want to show you is how to set up and use macros. So let me just go to, well, I guess that's it. Macros can be set over here in settings. And then you can see macros listed right here. And we pull this down. Let me work on this just a little bit to give you closer view, and so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. So you can see in the macro field, we have the different parts of the notes. You have the subjective, which is what the client tells you is going on. You can create your macros for that area. The other notes, which is what I found going on, other things that we talked about, other things where I feel the need to go there. You could call that objective if you wish. We call it other notes because it's designed to contain more than just objective findings. There's a plan area, so in your plan you can set up your plans there for macros. Then you may have a pre-check area, and that's part of the objective section, so it actually is there before other notes. Then we have a post-check, and that's going to be for the stuff that you would use after the visit or after the adjustment part of your visit. So you have pre-check, you have the adjustment, and then you have post-check. So you can put macros for each one of these sections, and that's what these are for. So let's just go in the subjective area. Right now, I just have one created right here, and the text is the client presented today for the detection and correction, if found, of vertebral subluxation. And that's on my encounter note, and I'll show you how that works in a second. If I need to add one for this, I can add macro. Macro name, let's put new patient. NP. Assign input, we're going to do subjective. The macro content is refer to new client documents that were scanned into the secure folder. Pertinent information was gathered from the document and entered where appropriate. So we can put that one there in the subjective. So now we should have two buttons when we go back to the client notes on in the subjective area. Now if I want to go to the other notes area, these are the two that I have. I have one that calls drop, which is a technique I use. I use Thompson drop techniques. So drop table technique employed to deliver adjustic thrust to indicated pelvic and lumbar subluxation. So I only have drop for my pelvic and lumbar areas. So I put that there if I use it. And then I also have a button for medical. And we talk about it as like if you have any kind of signs or symptoms or anything else that's not chiropractic, I advise you to go to your primary care provider. And so that's in here. The client was advised and counseled to seek medical advice for any diagnosis or workup of medical symptoms. We can put in other techniques here. You can put in activator. You can put in A to P thrust. You can put in any kind of anything else that you would use over and over and over again. You can put that information here in a macro so that it enters it. And then the neat thing is if you do it just exactly, if you do it properly, you can just go back and edit a few characters and you have a fresh note for each person without a cookie cutter uh, template for every visit for every client. I've known and heard that, well, in the past anyway, as we were transitioning from paper notes to electronic notes, the first 10 years of electronic notes, the reviewers and everybody was very upset that every note looked exactly the same. And now I think they're waking up that we can use the same phraseology without having the same exact um, uh, visit notes. And it kind of gets over the fact that when you have the same exact wording for every visit, you may not be taking adequate or legitimate notes. I think we're past that stage, but you can still go in and edit, and I'll show you that when we do this. So here's the plan. I have two plans in this demo. One is weekly. Weekly is indicated for detection and analysis of subluxation, and then 3 per week. The client is to present 3 times per week until further notice. So those are in my macro bundle for the plan section of the notes. Here in the pre-check, so this is going to show up when you see the notes, it's going to have a pre-check section. I do Titronics thermography, and so I have a in pattern, not in pattern, and also do leg checks. So I have a left pelvic deficiency or left short leg, right PD or PD equal with the cervical syndrome on the end. 99% of the time they're going to have a positive cervical syndrome, so that I just have that positive CS here. And it's real easy to go in and change that to a negative if for some reason they don't have the cervical syndrome showing up. And so these are all there. So when I do my scan, if they're in pattern, I can just click a button and it puts this text there. If they're not in pattern, I can put that text there. Depending on what I find, I can put that and then go in and change the ½ inch to 3/4 or 1 inch or 1½ inch or 5 inches, whatever it is, and then change the plus to a minus on that. It makes it a little bit easier to just go through and do notes. And then post check is the same. Did they clear? Did the thermography pattern change? And did they clear on the leg checks? And so that's what I have here. You can make this as robust as you want. You can have a lot of different buttons depending on what you do. And it's all here. The point of macros, though, is I want to point this out. Macros are not for everything that you would ever type. Macros are for those things that you use on a regular basis to save some typing. If you only once a year ever type in the person had an amputated left leg below the calf, making leg checks impossible or difficult or unreliable, or whatever we want to use. If you only do that once a year, or it's something that you've never seen before, I wouldn't try to create macros for those one-off instances or those things that you're only going to see once a month or once a quarter or once a year. Macros are intended for those things that you use on a regular basis over and over and over again. So hopefully that clears up the purpose of macros. Macros can also be misconstrued as I want to use what everybody else is using. That's not the purpose of macros either. Macros should be personal for you, using your words, your language, your vocabulary, your take on how you do things. But it's a way for you to make that easier to use by pressing a button rather than having to type everything out every time. Hope that clears some of the confusion up. Now let's go and check in a client. So we're going to do the Q menu. Hopefully you can see this. Going to check in a client. Oh, somebody's already there, so we don't need to do that. So we're going to go to Start for the new client. And let me get this screen where you can see it a little bit better, hopefully. I'm not going to focus on the sliders, so I'm going to get those off the screen so we can focus on the macros here. Let me just magnify this so it's easier to see for y'all. Okay, so what we have here on the right, salt button. I'm not going to talk about the salt button right now. That was a sticky situation that I didn't want to have, but I'm finding useful. We'll talk about that later. But you can see in my subjective area, we have the two macros that we had. So if I press this button, it's going to fill in all that text I put for that macro here. If I press it again, it'll put it again. As often as I press it, it'll put that in there. And then subluxation, again, the same thing. Whatever text I have associated with that macro gets entered in here. So they were in pattern left, but they didn't have cervical syndrome, just as simple as that. Let's say they were 1 inch. So let's get rid of that. Medical, I use the drop piece. Thermography changed, and they went equal. I want to continue their plan. And then there's down below, there's a place to sign it and stuff. But we're not going to focus on that. But that's how you use macros. In these text boxes, they're just text boxes, so you can type in anything you want. Hopefully that clears it up. Always, please ask questions. Please send me a text, send me an email, send me a Facebook message. Ask us for anything like that that you need help with. But hopefully this clears up how to use and set up macros, and the purpose behind them, the intent behind them, how to stay out of trouble with them, but how to use them to make your note-taking just that much easier for the stuff that you normally use. Again, if you have any questions, let me get my mouse up here. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to give me a call. Do not hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to help you. So this is Dr. Hoskins, PureCHIROnotes. Look forward to serving you and taking care of your notes for you so you can take care of your clients. Bye-bye.